Because ultimately, what paid to breathe really is, the paid to breathe method is the Patrick Lencioni advantage.
Absolutely.
Right? Because in so many times that we're looking for what is the most competitive edge that we have in the marketplace today, if you have not digitized your org health consulting firm or your desire to be an org health consultant, then you are literally shooting yourself in the foot.
And when the past signal calls, it's calling me. I'm paid to breathe.
Hey everybody, my name is Brian Lemus and I am the CEO of Paid to Breathe here, and I am joined today in our inaugural episode of the Paid to Breathe podcast. And I am joined here by the wonderful June Rivera and Justin Hansel. And guys, why don't you just tell us about who you are?
Guys, my name is June Rivera. I'm the COO and co-founder of Pay to Breathe with Brian. And yeah, we're just really excited to bring you guys some value today. I know there's a lot of searches going online on how to get, any type of help in terms of how to structure your business using the methodologies of Patrick Lencioni. So we have a pretty interesting episode. This is our origin story today, and the lovely name of Pat Lencioni, the Patrick Lencioni Advantage. That's what we're calling it today. So that's me today. I'm Justin. Take it away, my friend.
Hey everyone, Justin Hansel, partner here at Paid to Breathe, and I am really our Chief Innovation Officer. You guys will hear us talk about, leveraging our geniuses and how important it is to build a team around your geniuses and really leverage organizational health, not just externally, but internally as well. I come from a military background. You guys will hear more about that later, from the Space Force, doing intelligence work, as well as the Air Force. But that's enough about me. Brian, pass it back to you.
That's awesome. Like you said, and it's so crazy because you can hear the geniuses come alive, right?
Yeah.
I'm invention discernment, so I'm going to share a bit of the vision and everything out there. But really, the vision is these guys because, and you'll hear about my story and how this all came a bit here. But then you hear June being able to say the finish line. He's a nailment tenacity.
Yes,
so he is literally all about the finish line. And so that was so succinctly put together. I was like, dude, this is epic. And, and then just being one intervention and still being able to say, like, here's the vision. But as, we really get down here, you get to know more. So it's just so cool. And that's what I really want to set the precedent of what this podcast is and what it's not. Right. So this podcast is like, oh, man, it's like, well, it's obviously titled the Patrick Lencioni Advantage and everything like that. And what is Paid to Breathe? Because that's, first of all, like, well, what is this? Well, we are an organizational health consulting firm that was founded by what we call answering the PAT signal. Right. And so what is it? What does that really wind up meaning? So first and foremost, yes, we are an organizational health consulting firm that actually helps clients. We love to deliver in any ways that we can, whether in the nonprofit space, in the government contracting space, in government military space, or definitely in the Fortune 500 world, like I did at Samsung, as well. And it's just a mixture of all those things. But what is the common denominator? Was how do we wrap this in a bow for business development? So really, the Paid to Breathe podcast, in a certain sense, we differentiate what is Paid to Breathe is an organizational health consulting firm. The Paid to Breathe podcast is where we realize that there are people just like you watching this podcast here who realize, like, how do I build a business with org health? I'm answering the PAT signal, but I don't know where to go next, right? Like it's like the bat signal in the sky, right? And which Pat, does very, very well on this podcast. So if you're watching this podcast, you're definitely watching all of Pat's content as well. And, but definitely that's at least the differentiation, is where everything you'll see here is a mixture of our core values and our stories that we've come together, and how we really live org health, first of all. And then secondly, how do we deploy it in a client context, right? But more importantly, I think the biggest differentiation is that this is not a schoolroom or a classroom, right? This is lived practical experience and what is actually working in 2025, right? And beyond. Because what we really believe the biggest breakthrough in Paid to Breathe is we have digitized Pat Lencioni's methodology to the marketplace. So we really exist to connect the org health movement to the marketplace. And those are the key concepts of me being able to cast this vision, right, of invention and discernment, really know how do we take this vision of org health and practically put it in the most, like, I guess, tactical but in the very best uses of your time watching this podcast, and everybody else is here. So that, I think just kind of going into how we got here, right? So that really leads answering the Pat signal, which is 2014. I remember hearing Pat. I was a focused missionary, and so there's this group called the Fellowship of Catholic University Students, and Pat in himself is Catholic, and he's very, very lives his faith within, even more so inside the table group. You've been able to hear, he loves to share. If you look at any other writings that he's writing now, it's books about his faith. So back, that was 11 years ago, and I was this young chap, obviously less gray, like no, I still had a beard, but definitely hearing Pat speak from stage, and I was mesmerized. And I told my girlfriend at the time, I was like, babe, one day I will work with this guy or work for him. But that was when I really saw and heard the Pat signal, and particularly that this guy was a man of faith, and he was really breaking down, sharing a very vulnerable story of how everybody, including me, the young people in the audience, gave him hope for the next generation, and especially his children, to live their faith more boldly, right? To be more vulnerable. You can't be vulnerable enough. And that was like, I've never heard. Apparently, this guy works with Southwest Airlines, works with like so many major like brands, and he's up here saying like you can. It's like total opposite, right? I'm like, and I came from the political background. We'll have more episodes about that, but I'm like, ain't no way. Like, that was my first thought. So that's how I wound up hearing the Pat signal, going into nonprofit world, taking it to Fortune 500 at Samsung, and even meeting the Pope and bringing org health all the way into the Vatican. And guess what, guys? Org health disrupts anywhere, wherever you go, because the scripture says when you pour new wine into old wineskins, they burst. And so I'm here to burst your bubble that if you think being able to build a business with org health is going to be for the faint of heart, it's not. And if you're experiencing all these like, what the heck is happening? Like, why? Because there is a lot of things that authenticity in this world is so crazy. We live in such an AI world, but it's actually going to be the number one thing that when Pat was really like cutting through the noise and building this movement, answering the Pat signal was something that really just stuck to me. And I was like, you know what? I want to be on a path there. But that's how I felt the call to org health and brought it in here. But then ultimately, as I was in the marketing world too, it led me to the first Zoom session, being like certified in the first class with Pat in Working Genius. And there was a lot of cool things. We'll talk more about that, what it was there, but that led me to really believe that, I was coming from the digital marketing world, and how do those two worlds pair together? And Pat said, they really don't, you know? And I was like, ooh, the first time I disagree with something with Pat, like that was like very mind blowing to me. And I was like, so I don't want to hear these guys' story, but that's honestly flows right into where I met June. Because in the convergence of digital marketing, we were in a thing called masterminds in the marketing world. And we met each other, and we were like in this challenge, right?
Yeah.
And being able to really figure out, but I introduced the Working Genius, like which he thought was a part of the actual like challenge, and it wasn't. Because when you have to be able to use it, and we'll talk more about how to use Working Genius in startups, how I've used it to use my personal BS radar, right?
Absolutely.
And really know who's gonna be with you in the long run and who's gonna be with you for the short term. Not saying that's the wrong thing either, but I'm saying that you got to know who you're working with. But like that goes into marketing means org health, right?
Absolutely. And meeting org health was a very, very interesting thing because it was a concept that in my career, I come from corporate hospitality. I worked for Landry's Corporation for many years. And I remember when I was thinking about the concepts when I was getting taught from Brian, he was teaching me all about like, all the geniuses, how wonder works, how tenacity, which is me, how enablement, all these little things.
Mm-hmm.
And it reminded me of how many miscommunications were happening in my field of work, particularly being in corporate, right? There is a lot of ego. There's a lot of, not necessarily things that we don't want to do because we intentionally do that at work, but it's very subconscious. And sometimes we don't really know where that comes from. And that understanding my geniuses made me understand where those things come from. So that was one thing that I really took away from the challenge when I was introduced that, concept of working genius and how we came up with a way to bring that into marketing world, right?
Yep.
That was the twist because he used the working genius for us to work in the challenge well, how to communicate well. And that was the introduction to the digital world. That part of organizational health was coming into the digital world. And that's how I was like, oh, wow, this is so incredible. I remember I was talking to Brian in one of our sessions. I was like, bro, this is a business model in itself.
This is the actual freaking business, right?
Literally, that was like, we were just having a conversation on the phone. And it was like, wow, this is actually a business in itself. And then I understood where it came from and the stories from the background, going to the Vatican, all these things. And one thing that really Brian taught me was, and I mean, I would say he introduced me was the concept of healing the family through organizational health. Why? Because it made sense to me a lot. For me, when I was in corporate, all that stress that I had, all these frustrations, I was bringing that to my house. And why was that happening? Because the geniuses, I didn't know about the geniuses, so I didn't know where the miscommunication was coming from. Now that I know that many of the miscommunications were coming from not understanding the geniuses, I was like, wow, this really, really makes sense. And then I connected the dot of how we can actually introduce organizational health to, like healing the family. And that's where the digitization and whatnot came from. But
yeah, starting to build our first funnel,
exactly,
right? Starting to build how does it look like opt-in sequences? Like where are what is the person's like psychology when it comes to like them looking for these services?
Absolutely.
Because the thing is and the table group says it too many times before, and it kind of goes into Justin's story because there's a blue ocean of opportunity.
Absolutely.
But how are we really gonna narrow them down and funnel them down into where we can digitize a process, right, in 2025 and beyond, in how when marketing meets org health, right? We're connecting this intersection here. And that's really what you did, right?
Absolutely.
Being able to come, together. And so at that, ultimately, to where finally, I think it was with the leads that we started seeing coming through. We're like, dude, there's actually like 20 people on here, right? And I was like, oh man, like this is a breakthrough, right? This is before I moved out to Puerto Rico, and it's crazy. Yeah, we're coming you here from beautiful islands of Puerto Rico,
San Juan, Puerto Rico in the house, baby.
and that's where we're headquartered here.
Yes,
but I think there is so much to where it's like, okay, now you're on an island in the middle of the ocean, right? And people are knocking on your door.
Yes.
Right. And so that's when all of a sudden, but then it got to a point where it was so much we couldn't even handle.
Absolutely.
Where it was like, and we were just cherry picking. I mean, when you see big brands coming through, you're like, okay, I'm gonna go work with them, right? And they're like, and so like that. And then, there's people that start reaching out saying, are you actually gonna help me or not? And so that was a really pivotal moment where we're like, okay, this isn't just for us. Like these breakthroughs of what we realized is not just for us. And, this is meant to be really, once again, going back to the answering the Pat signal was when I was on part of that original class, Pat really was saying that this is something that he really envisions, like the world needs as many org health consulting firms as they need, right? They need more table groups. They need more people who are going to answer this call to be able to do that. And so I really took that to heart. I was like, I feel like that was my marching orders. How can I be able to build something that allows more org health consultants to come out in the world and build their own firms and be sustainable, right?
Absolutely.
Actually monetize it. So made a post in the Working Genius community, and it was like crazy bonkers, right? Everybody was like, they want to know more about this breakthrough in lead gen. And one of the guys that came through on the call was Justin Hansel.
Yes, sir.
And so I think definitely Justin, love to hear about how, obviously military leadership means org health and beyond, but definitely kind of like what was going on in your process of like, we said founder and co-founder, but definitely coming in as our partner here, one of the first ones, like, yeah, well, how has that journey been for you?
Yeah, so originally for me, really started in like 2022, and I could go earlier than that, but that's when I first really learned about Pat Lencioni and the working genius model, right? And I was going through leadership schools in the military and just looking for like who are the best leaders out there, who are the ones that really know how to run a team, especially a small team trying to do far more, punch above their weight as we were doing in the Space Force, like every single Guardian in the Space Force is having to do. What is a really practical way that I can move my team forward and lead well and lead with awareness on my team where I'm not feeling like I have to try to do everything, because that's what I've done most of my career. And that's why I excelled, was because I did all the things, right? And realized that's not going to work forever. I can't be everything to everyone. We talk about the best leaders being self-aware leaders. So that was something for me that definitely took some maturity to get to that point. And Working Genius totally helped me out. Um, but I didn't get certified for quite some time. Eventually, when I did fairly recently, I got into our community there and was looking around as I'm doing business development type stuff and trying to figure out if I could do this full time. Like, what do I need? What are the pieces to put it all together? And that's when we connected, right? I saw your post about, hey, we cracked the code to lead generation. I'm like, I know that's it. Like, I've done some sales, marketing training. I've done a lot of attempts on my own at business and spent tens of thousands of dollars on programs to get to the point of still being like, okay, I've got the skills. I've learned a lot of micro skills on how to build a business, but I still don't have leads, right? Like, I need a way in at companies. I need a way in to the marketplace that can connect my skill sets that I've developed over my career in the military, as well as through learning all of Pat's methodologies, um, to actually serve people. Because I can't be helpful if I never get in front of anyone to have that strategy session, to make that connection and show how I can actually help that organization. So that's when we met. And then you guys just helped me jump to whole new levels that I didn't even realize were possible. And that brings us, to where we are now.
That's amazing. And what we call that is quantum leaps, right? And starting to really be able to do this. And it was so crazy because, when we really look at I love, like, this is behind the scenes. We're taking time now to just like sit and, like, guys, we're really just talking about like what just happened over the past 3 months, right? Because it's been a whirlwind, right? It's like, so many things new, but then so many things are just like, oh, right, then, and like going to deploy, and like, if you really had to boil down your experience, because then I was like, Justin, we're still narrowing this out. We're just kind of gauging interest for like maybe the next month or two that we would then offer. And I was like, and you're like, what, could I just come in now? Like, could I really come and figure out what that is? And you understood from the context of that, like, in any other context in the marketplace, right? Anybody that says lead generation, there's a cost associated with that, right? Whether it's going to be one for you personally, like, I need to run ads for a chance to get a lead, right? Yep. I need to spend something where advertising so I can get in front of the eyeballs of people who are looking for this here. And, and definitely that was, telling you my story was like, when I very first started, I was like, that's what resonated with me. I was like, okay, there's something here with Justin that, definitely, because for a lot of what we realize now, there are people who are wanting to be there, but they're still like in an employee mindset, right? Where, we're getting paid day in, day out. And I got this, either my company sponsored me to come get the certification. And now I can go do it in-house, right? But it's like, kind of like, man, like, I mean, I'm the youngest of four brothers. So I remember like being like the one day, like, I can go out and play football. Right. Like, I see my brothers putting their life on the line, like going crazy, like, especially in Texas, 2 days where I'm originally from. But it's like always looking from the sidelines. Like, one day I could be cool like that. One day I can be that warrior that's out there slaying the dragon. And I think that's kind of where the movement in itself is kind of at this point where people who just either take the plunge and just start doing it. But as you realize, we could say people gatekeep, and for a certain extent, like, what works for you is your competitive advantage, right? But when we stop seeing everybody as competition and we see it as a movement, and we're able to really start sharing resources and really, but collectively respecting, right? Also, the investments have gone to these breakthroughs, right? That was a really big piece of the component because when we looked at these quantum leaps, you know, decades, what would have taken you decades to learn, you were learning in days, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, man. And so like collapsing the time frames. And I think one of the bigger things that we realized was, the biggest breakthrough was how many leads did you get in 2 weeks, the first like 2 weeks that we worked together, that you came
Yeah, I
into
think
it.
it was over 60, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
what was that experience? Like people ask us like, what's your guarantee? And I was like, that's crazy. Cause I'm like,
Or
at
guarantee.
a
I
certain
remember
point,
that.
right? You remember that? And it was just like, what
When did
what
leads that have
well no, yeah,
guarantees?
like I was like, what guarantee does Facebook give you
I have
when you're
no
gonna run
idea.
a like they're gonna you expect to get an ad, you expect to get a lead out of that? Like
That's
that's on
crazy.
you. That's your marketing, that's your
Uh,
funnel. That's like so many things in our brain that like we were like so further ahead,
yeah,
like by just doing
absolutely.
that we hadn't even registered. Like that's even like
A thing.
a
Yeah, it
thing,
is. Yeah,
right?
it
You're
was crazy.
guaranteed. So, I said your phone will ring guaranteed,
I
right?
remember we came up with that. But that was the best guarantee, honestly.
Because was it true, Justin?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think about a lot of that transition from analog to digital, right? If I were to introduce you to someone and be like, hey, this person's interested in working genius, you should talk to them. What an amazing value that is, right? To just be able to network with that person, to at least have an introduction to someone that's interested in any of Pat's models or working genius specifically. And then now the ball's in your court. Like, you're on that call, you're having that conversation, whether it's in person or over the phone, and it's on you. So now it's like, all right, what's that next step? What's that next skill set that I need to learn? How do I take that next quantum leap in my business to build the business?
Yeah.
Because now you're at that new level, right? You have a new hurdle, you have new challenges. And that's good to have because it's a sign of progress, right? You're no longer wondering, how do I get leads? How do I get in front of people? It's like, okay, now I can get in front of people. What's next? And then what's next after that? So you can spend years sharpening your axe and being the best org health consultant in the world in secret. It does you no good, right? If you're not making those introductions and having those connections and be able to have, I call it a strategy session with someone to provide them value and help them see why they need to use org health and why these models are great, then you don't have a business. You just have a hobby. You just have something that you enjoy talking about and doing, but it's not a business until it converts. And I think those are the things that people are afraid to talk about, that we're talking about here on this podcast and we talk about within the business, because we do this as a business, not just as a hobby.
Right. And I think that really goes right into our core values because, that's what I realized, that the reason I've even talked about with everybody here is like, why am I not afraid to talk about finances? Because I did full-time missionary work, right? So once I left college, I felt the call to do full-time missionary work with the group focus. That's where I met Pat. And being able to hear at that conference, in order for me to get there, I guess what I had to fundraise 100% of my salary, right, to be a full-time missionary in that organization. And that looked a lot like sales. It looked a lot like where your teammates are like, "Hey, how's MPD going? How's your fund mission partner development? How's your fundraising going?" And like, "Well, I'm at like 1,600 right now a month." Like, dude, that's awesome. Like, you're growing. I just broke 2,500 a month. Dude, praise God. Like being able to have those upfront conversations, like have what we've talked about, people having the talk. And
Yeah.
I think in the Oracle Health movement right now, that is one thing to really expect from our podcast is like we'll break that fourth wall because one, I don't want to be the only one playing on the field, right? We don't want to be like there shouldn't just be like it shouldn't just be really Pat. And if anything, Pat, like other table group being like the only ones playing, they want more people to play. There's so much opportunity, Blue Ocean, for 60 leads, and those were 60s like leaders, right, of CEOs, like people who are looking for it here, but through the actual systems that we've created, Paid to Breathe, the digitization of the org health movement, right? Those people were coming to you in Colorado, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Like you weren't going to the Chamber of Commerce to go like knock on an opportunity. They were like, no, like I literally like was looking for this. I just read the book, right? that's the majority of our conversation with the leads that we, when we get to talk with them. I was reading his book, like, how do I do this? And those
Yep.
are CEOs, those are leaders, right? So it's like there is I mean, to say in abundance, it almost feels like it's like one of those like just like kind of like very lofty words, like, oh man, it's an abundance, but no, it's actually scriptural. Like God came, we might have life and live it abundantly, right? And so that goes into our fourth core value of what pay to breathe is, and who we are is God before business, right? And so definitely you'll always hear us being unabashedly about our faith and being able to say how we bring this into the marketplace, because let's look outside a little bit. It's a little bit dark. There needs a little bit more Christ light in the world, right? And
Amen.
and if you don't disagree, if you don't agree with that, that's totally cool. We still love you. But that's what we call our flavor of org health.
Yes, sir.
Right. Well, we feel that I really feel the best way that, one, being Catholic, two, and being able to realize that Pat was on stage there in like kind of answering that Pat, Pat didn't know. Pat, like I met him like in a breakout session and got my book copy of Advantage signed, right? But if Pat Lencioni would be like, you know who Brian Lemus is? Absolutely not. Like, maybe, right? But it's in a certain sense, like there's so many, like you were saying, doing it alone, going it alone. And Pat changed all of our lives, that it's like you have these, when you are being assigned this breakthrough, it's not just for you, it's for the kingdom. But definitely what we really realized was like, we want to make sure people who are really aligned to these core values, first and foremost, for our business, for our firm, right? And pretty much really be able to say that just because we talk about God does not mean we're not dangerous in the business world, right? Because definitely you got Space Force, you got Samsung, you got corporate hospitality, right?
Landry's,
And
yes,
and,
sir.
and Landry's,
Yep.
Landry's Corp, and some of the craziest digital marketers in the world, right? Like our mentors, you can go check out the webinar that we have in the link below, where we talk a little bit more in detail about who our mentors come from.
Absolutely.
But go look up Myron Golden, right? Go look up Kiala Kanai, right? Go look up these people who like definitely are titans in the industry. And when you realize the collective like 300 grand, we say that because that's the only thing that would, if we told you the actual price of how much we've actually invested, it would sound fake. But we could leave it at 300 grand for now, right? And so if you don't want to spend decades or 300 grand to be able to have the breakthroughs in digitizing the org health business today, for today, right? Get a phone call within your first week from someone looking for working genius, someone looking for any of the parts of then that's the whole point, where I think we move into like this was only one part, right? Justin, you realize that certified, and then it was like, wait, but then we had to realize our leads are coming in and the offers that we actually deliver are offsites, not just for working genius. It's like we're actually org health consultants. So maybe you can talk about that, Justin, and like even what you discovered, what we call the teamwork trifecta.
Yeah, definitely. On the business side, right? Like I was trying to build things out on my own, and maybe this resonates with some folks, like taking the working genius and trying to build it into something bigger, more offers, a longer engagement, which I still think is totally possible, but it really is just one piece of what Pat calls the teamwork trifecta, right? And that is bringing in the several different methodologies, combining them all together in a way that makes the most sense, that's optimal, that you don't have to try to figure it out yourself. So that, accelerator training for me was an intensive of going through and like, all right, we're going to learn ideal team player, 5 dysfunctions of a team. You've already got working genius, but we're going to build on that because you can go even further. And then the advantage to really wrap it all together and put a bow on it. And it has been the biggest quantum leap, I think, of anything that I've done, because it's just an amazing training intensive that compacts what would take you months, right? If you did it at a slower pace, it's going to take you like 8 months, a year, whatever that looks like. Comparatively, like it's just a no-brainer to be like, let's do it this way. So it's packaged, it's systematized, it's structured, and then you're able to deliver at a whole new level. Like now you are truly an org health consultant rather than a certified facilitator in one methodology. Like big difference there when people are looking at your consulting firm.
Absolutely.
Oh yes.
And and I mean, I think that's definitely it goes to show. I mean, it is no secret. We'll demystify it here. Justin, has bought in as a partner, right? And being able, and there is a path as well that we'll talk about more inside of it when you go in the link below, and you can see all the descriptions there, different opportunities, and this what we call this the accelerator, right? It was like, and it's such a speaking of quantum leaps, it was such a quantum leap that I was like, yo, I just wanted to kind of share lead gen revenue share. Like, I didn't really know what was like, we're building this like offer, right? There was no nefarious like game plan, like this is what we're gonna do. This has been like when I can say the moment, Justin, you were like, yeah, I'm cool. Here's my credit card. We'll run it monthly, to get access to the leads. And then, but we've really built out like everything in the process of being able to say, like, this is, and it wasn't because it was because it was already inside of me. It was inside of us here, right? And how we deliver org health services. But in the same sense, like you can't get what you don't have. So, I can give people access to leads, but if they don't know how to actually tailor the conversations into knowing what there's the Marvel universe, right? Well, there's the Pat Lencioni universe, which we call the Teamwork Trifecta, right? It's like really the bridge of ideal team player, working genius, and the five dysfunctions with the advantage, right? And how does that all fit together? So if you've had those questions, we have answers, right? Because ultimately, what paid to breathe really is, the paid to breathe method is the Patrick Lencioni Advantage.
Absolutely.
Right? Because in so many times that we're looking for what is the most competitive edge that we have in the marketplace today, if you have not digitized your org health consulting firm or your desire to be an org health consultant, then you are literally shooting yourself in the foot, specifically with the advent of AI and the ways that the AI conversations, Justin, we have these days, pertaining to the org health movement. And it's just next level, right? So, I think that's more or less importantly, as we kind of like close here, this actually probably goes a little bit longer than the usual ones you'll probably see from us coming out here. But hey, this is the first one, right?
It's the first one. We're celebrating our first podcast, guys. So thank you so, so much for just listening to us. And we got a lot of more stuff's coming in. Check the links below the description. There might be, I don't know, we're gonna run a challenge right now. So whatever we launch, you will see it down below in the descriptions. If we're not launching that right now, then you can check out another replay and we'll update you guys about that. But
yeah, because we'll definitely be, like I said, the it'll say cart closed because we definitely, as of right now, there is no challenge. Like we just ran our first one together, and so definitely as we'll be able to get ready for if we have another one, because definitely we want to be able to, we realize that we want to maybe start giving the best way that we can of our time and our talents and our gifts. Because God for Business is definitely realizing this is not just for us here. So if any of this resonates with you on there, definitely book a call with us in the comment below, right? We'd love to hear from you, and definitely here because, this Working Genius is just the beginning, right?
yes.
But we wanted the whole enchilada, right? And the whole thing was that I was not trained, right, in just the Working Genius. I've been living and practically executing org health, and Working Genius came as the cherry on top of everything, right? So like that's when you realize, we talked about abundance, and that's not our last core value is, abundance through surrender.
Yes, sir.
And so at a certain point, you have to let go of your ego. First off, if you have ego, there is no way you're ever going to be an org health consultant. That's an oxymoron, right?
Number one.
And more focus on the moron part, because like seriously, like it's moronical that you would ever think that you could ever have ego and be an org health consultant there.
And in all honesty, we all have it. We just need to tone it down when we need to help other people. That's the only difference.
Because are you an ideal team player, right? I mean, and so many times, like, as we really see it, and we could be here for hours. Guess what? We invite you to come celebrate as hours, the conversation we have,
Absolutely.
In our future podcast here, because definitely we do close that we've answered the pack signal, but will you? Right? That's the biggest question. We want to work with and talk with the people who are serious about answering the PAT signal, because this world and this marketplace needs it now more than ever.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So with that being said, guys, God bless you.
Thank you so
And
much.
we look forward to seeing you on the next episode.
God bless.
God bless
you guys.